Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Deraa English. The uprising in Syria is approaching 16 months and the violence continues. The southern city of Deraa was shelled overnight on Friday, killing at least 20 people. The attack came amid further violence in the village of Qubair, where activists say about 80 people were killed. And while the Syrian government and the opposition blame one another, the international community appear to be scrambling for a solution. Kristen Salumi has more.
The assessment at the United Nations was bleak.
The crisis is escalating. The violence is getting worse. The abuses are continuing.
And the message was clear.
The international community has united, but it now must take that unity to a new level. We must find the will and the common ground to act and act as one.
The news of another massacre in Syria, this one in the village of Al-Kabir in Hama province, provided a shocking backdrop to the discussions in New York.
A village apparently surrounded by Syrian forces, the bodies of innocent civilians lying where they were shot, some allegedly burned or slashed with knives.
The Syrian ambassador denied his government was responsible for the latest violence or the failure of Kofi Annan's six-point plan, which was meant to end it and start a political process.
Syria is prepared to offer everything that it can so that Mr. Annan's mission succeeds. The doors of Syria are open to all those that try to establish national and global dialogue and true reform.
Everyone, including Kofi Annan, has acknowledged that his six-point plan is on life support. Annan said there should be consequences for those who violate it, and first responsibility lies with the Syrian government. Western powers read that as support for sanctions. They now want a specific timeline for them. How long the UN observer mission can be sustained has also become an open question. Diplomats have confirmed to Al Jazeera armor-piercing bullets and surveillance drones have been used to hamper them.
We all recognize that there is a great deal of vulnerability on the observer mission at the moment. The Secretary General set out a number of attacks that had been made on the observer mission, including the destruction of one of the vehicles driven by the observer mission, which had been attacked by the government forces. Now, in those circumstances, it's clear that the current configuration of the mission is not sustainable in the long term.
The one potential new initiative, a contact group of countries that would include Syrian allies, is also a point of contention.
We think Iran has not demonstrated to date a readiness to contribute constructively to a peaceful political solution.
Inside the United Nations, there were calls time and again for action, but no sign of a breakthrough. Outside, another reminder, if one was needed, of the human cost of diplomatic inaction, amplifying the warning that Syria could move very quickly from tipping point to breaking point. Kristen Salumi, Al Jazeera, the United Nations.
So, U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton met with Kofi Annan in Washington on Friday, and while Annan acknowledged that his peace plan was not working, he said everyone was looking for a solution. Britain, France and the U.S. are set to be drawing up a Security Council resolution leveling sanctions on Syria. And Clinton's special advisor on Syria, Fred Hoff, was in Moscow. He met Russian diplomats in a bid to persuade them to back Assad's removal, but with no information about a leadership change being planned in Damascus, Moscow remains defiant. While the Russian Foreign Ministry described the talks as, quote, an exchange of opinions on ways to foster a peaceful resolution in Syria, but reaffirmed its position that Kofi Annan's plan must be fulfilled by all sides. But as prospects for a negotiated transition in Syria become increasingly less likely, the U.S. is eager to co-opt Russia into applying more pressure on Bashar al-Assad. Let's bring in our guests. In Moscow, Professor Alexander Kuznetsov from the Russian State University for Trade and Commerce and Vice President of the Geo-Arabica Center. That's an independent Middle East research center. In Beirut, retired General Hisham Jabir, head of Middle East Center for Studies and Research in the Lebanese capital. And over in Paris, Samir Aita. He's a member of the Syrian Democratic Forum, which is an opposition group. Welcome all of you gentlemen to Inside Syria. It's good to have you with us. Alexander, Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, says that there's no alternative to Annan's plan. Kofi Annan himself says that his six-point peace plan is not being implemented. Your reaction?
Actually, I would like to say that this massacre in Hula took place just before the session of the Council of the Security of the United Nations Organization. And other cases of the violence also took place just before the sessions of the Security Council. To my mind, these are the provocations of the terrorists and of some external forces to break the Kofi Annan's plan, the Kofi Annan's peaceful plan.
Right, but we clearly have a deadlock on terms of the diplomatic front. That's what I'd like to get to with you. When Russia's foreign minister is saying that there's no alternative to Kofi Annan's plan, Annan says the plan is not being implemented. What's the solution here diplomatically? It seems like it's a tricky situation.
The situation is very hard and is very complicated, but according to the Russian proposals and some other proposals, their only solution is to not to make some interference in the Syrian internal affairs, especially military interference, because it will be very dangerous and it will only exacerbate the situation. But to start the peaceful process and especially the conversations, the talks between the sides of the conflict, the Syrian government and also the Syrian opposition.
General Hisham Jaber in Beirut, let's pick up on that point by Alexander when he talks about there's no appetite rather for military interference because that would be a very dangerous situation. But isn't there already interference, whether it's on the behalf of the international, the Western community that are backing the opposition? They're supporting the opposition, and then you have countries such as Russia and China that are backing the Syrian government.
Yes, Mr. Alexander is talking about military operation, not military intervention. Everybody knows that there is a military intervention. Right. As you said, Russia and China are providing weapons to Syria, and also, on the other hand, the Western countries are sending weapons and financial aids, and also they encourage the insurgent in many military ways. But we are talking that any military intervention, any military operation from outside is not acceptable by the Russian, at least, and Russia will not let such decision see the light. They are talking about putting Syria under the Article 7. What Article 7 consists of? Consists of economic sanctions or economic embargo and cutting the diplomatic relations and blocking funds for the government and public officials and public figures. All those are already done. The fourth point in the Article 7 is the military intervention or the military operation from outside. I don't think the Russian government will let such decision go from the Security Council.
Right, and Chapter 7, as you refer to, Chapter 7 is certainly being pushed for by the Arab League. The Arab League is pushing the United Nations to invoke Chapter 7, and as you're saying, this could ultimately include the use of military force. Samir Aita in Paris, what's your take?
First, the Kofi Annan plan, despite many technical errors, both on the ground in the political process they were making, is based on an agreement from the big three of the Security Council, meaning China, Russia, and the United States. While this agreement doesn't seem to be here yet. So if any delay in this agreement, we saw some signs of it, but there is no real agreement between China and Russia and the US on the thing. Second thing, there is, despite the war of Bashar al-Assad and its people, another war coming of 3 states, which means Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey on Syria, pushing some military groups which has nothing to do with the revolution. They are Islamists. They are participating in some escalation of the violence. Look at the places where all these dramatic massacres has been made. They are on, let's say, the border of the Alawite Mountains, like if someone is pushing from both sides to the division of the country. This is not unacceptable. What do you want Kofi Annan to do in that? You have a situation which is very dangerous. People are talking about civil war. We are in a civil war. Look at what is happening in, let's say, in Latakia. Look at your own coverage of the news. You are talking only about the civilians who are killed, who are killed in a very bad way. But there is no way beside having these observers to know who has been killing, what's happened, and etc. And my belief, my information
is
the
Syrian government, Samir, the Syrian government.
It's not the army. It's not. Sorry.
The Syrian government, as you know, does not allow journalists into the country, so it's very difficult to verify information when it comes out of Syria. But Al Jazeera does stand by its reporting. But let me just get into this issue of a contact group. Let me ask you about the contact group. Let me ask you about the contact group that Kofi Annan is suggesting. And he's suggesting to bring together the Western as well as Middle Eastern states, as you know, Russia, Turkey, and China. Now, the Americans are saying that they're not keen to sit down with the Iranians because Kofi Annan is saying that Iran should be part of this contact group. What do you make of that?
If you want a solution in Syria, you have to bring all the countries involved in Syria into a table and saying, okay, let's set a solution. Of course, in my opinion, even Russia and Iran will accept at some point to let the regime go. In a way, because you cannot have a peace with Bashar al-Assad in power. But some other powers are fighting together. I think there is a difference between what Saudi Arabia is playing, what Turkey is playing, what Qatar is playing. Between them, they don't act in a coordinated way. And they are fighting together on the Syrian ground to get everybody advantage. The same is for the Iranians and other groups. So it is necessary to have this contact group to get everybody committed on a solution.
General
on the other hand, you see the Friends of Syria the Friends of Syria calling for another contact group between the Friends of Syria, which means they are trying to kill this basic idea that has been put in place 6 months ago, and it is somehow very late to put it, but it is necessary to put all the powers involved in the Syrian conflict to sit together and to decide on a solution.
General Hisham, what do you think about the contact group? Do you foresee it having any chance of success when the Americans, as I was telling Samir, have come out and said that they're not keen to sit with Iran on a table, and Saudi Arabia would probably have a problem with that too?
Yes. If we want to solve the problem, let me tell you something. I heard today that an American statement that said we will not accept Iran to be a member of the liaison team because Iran is part of the problem. And naturally, if Iran is a part of the problem, could be a part of the solution. Why they didn't say, for example, that Moscow is part of the problem, since Moscow is providing weapons and help to the Syrian regime. As I think if they want a real solution, they have, like Mr. Samir said, they have to include everyone on the table, all countries who are involved in a way or another in the Syrian regime. And in this also subject, let me tell you about Kofi Annan plans. We are among the experts or the analysts who said since the beginning that Kofi Annan plan was born dead. Why? Because it's a military issue. When we talk about ceasefire, if you talk about 6 points of Mr. Kofi Annan, you are talking about both sides. On one hand, the Syrian regime will not respect this ceasefire if there is no guarantee or no pressure on it. And the Syrian regime said, I will not the army will not go back to its barracks because there is no guarantee that the insurgent will not take advantage and gain success, military success on the land. Kofi Annan plan was supposed to be, in my opinion, a great agreement between all countries who have influence in Syria, like they say in French, cahier de charge. This agreement was supposed to be signed by the Syrian, by Russia, by Turkey, by the Arab countries who are supporting the insurgent, and also under the sponsorship of the United States. Otherwise, that plan was supposed not to have any success from the beginning. Now, if they want a solution, they are talking about one of two, or liaison team concerning Syria, including Iran or not including Iran, or having an international congress or international meeting about Syria in which, you know, they can stress to have a solution and bring everybody to the table of the dialogue. Otherwise, there is no solution in Syria, and we will see more escalation on the situation in Syria. Providing weapons to the insurgent, in my opinion, is not a good idea, and many Americans said it's not a good idea because they are not sure where it will be the final destination of those weapons, maybe on the hand of Al-Qaeda, and they will be out of control.
All right, Alexander, General Hisham, they're calling Kofi Annan's peace plan dead right from the beginning, but just give me your take on this new contact group that Annan is proposing. Is there any way, in your opinion, that it can prevent a complete collapse of Kofi Annan's plan?
I think that not only the Syrian government, but also the armed opposition, that military opposition makes troubles on the way to implement the Kofi Annan's plan. Because we have heard the statement of the Syrian Free Army that it will not withdraw its troops from the cities. So the military opposition breaks the Kofi Annan's plan. And I would like to add something about the parts of the conflict and the international part of the conflicts, because it was said that Russia and Iran are the parts of the problem, but the United States of America is also the part of the problem. According to my mind, the main aim of the American is not to establish democracy in Syria, but to overthrow the Assad's regime. And these are very different things, because we know that after the American intervention in Iraq, Iraq now is an uncontrollable and divided state, and Libya also is the uncontrollable and the divided states. And it's very dangerous that Syria also may turn into this state.
Samir, seeing as up until very recently there has not been appetite from the so-called international community, or at least that's what the international community has been saying when it comes to Syria, is the Russian position, is Russia perhaps doing the international community a favor when it vetoes a UN Security Council resolution and it says that it will not support any use of military power?
In my opinion, the Russian position is not sustainable. They cannot just block decisions. They have to have a proactive activity in order to bring some solution, and you don't see them going to that, and their situation cannot go as far. But the same applies to Turkey. Turkey is fully arming the opposition, is going almost to war in the thing. Look, let me say it like this. I hope that these massacres, these horrible massacres that people have seen in Syria, I hope they wake up all these countries, all this international community. What do you want? We are in a civil war. What is missing is a full-fledged civil war, which means at the scale of Libya, meaning 200,000, 300,000 deaths in Syria. What is necessary? The army is having heavy casualties, the regime army, having casualties every day. The other people are, the Free Syrian Army is having heavy casualties, and the civilians from both sides are armed, are becoming sectarian. They want to kill the Shia, the Sunni want to kill the Shia,
so I'll put to you the question that you just posed. What is needed?
This.
Okay, how?
The international, there is a basic need of an agreement between the Chinese, the Russians, and the US. This on how to make a solution for Syria. There is, starting from this agreement, a need to go and talk with the countries like Qatar, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia, and Iran, who are, for the fourth of them, part of the problem and deep part of the problem. Iran, like Saudi Arabia, like Turkey, they have to calm down in order to stop this fight on, let's say, through Syrian civilians, through the Syrians, and etc. Unless the whole region will blow up.
General Hisham, if a UN Security Council resolution, a possibly upcoming one, we know that the US, Britain and France might be putting one forward to the UN Security Council, If indeed it is blocked by Russia and China, as has been done twice in the past, do you foresee a scenario where these countries could go round the UN Security Council? And would that be a good idea in your opinion? And one more question to you, which I put to Samir. How do you see this playing out?
Yes, it's not a good idea, as you said. It will make the problem much more complicated. The best solution, in my opinion, as we said, like I agree with Mr. Samir, what he said, that every country is involved in Syria in a way or another, has to be included in this team, part of the problem, part of the solution also. And I'll go back to Kofi Annan. Kofi Annan, the most important point and the sixth point is the ceasefire. When you talk about ceasefire, you're talking about two sides. On one hand, the Syrian regime, and behind it, Moscow. And on the other hand, you have many armed groups. And believe me, every armed group in Syria, there is behind it a side which finances it, which supports it. We have to put those sides before their responsibility and let them sign a real ceasefire. This is in one hand. And second, and everybody, I don't agree with Mr. Samir that there is a civil war in Syria. It's not a civil war yet. Civil war, that means the population is fighting each other. It's not the case in Syria. We still have a regime in Syria. But the problem, if Syria go into a civil war, I will say, like I hear today from a common friend, that Kofi Annan said, not in public, that in Libya was in implosion. That means internal explosion. But in Syria, if there is a civil war, it will be an explosion. That means it will touch the whole area. Lebanon will be the first country which follows Syria in civil war.
Right.
And in my opinion, also Iraq and Jordan.
Okay,
Iraq, it will be, yeah, go ahead.
Let me just get final thoughts from Alexander on what you think the way forward is here.
I think that the consequences of the Syrian crisis may influence all the region, unfortunately, and they may provoke an explosion in the whole region, especially in Lebanon, where we have observed the clashes between religious communities. And also they may have exacerbated the situation in Iraq and also in Jordan, because the internal situation in Jordan is also not so stable as the mass media tell us. And of course, the main task of the international community is to prevent
I'll have to leave it there, Alexander. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of the show, but thank you very much, gentlemen, all of you, for joining us on this edition of Inside Syria. In Moscow, Alexander Kuznetsov; in Beirut, Hisham Jaber; and in Paris, Samir Aita. Thank you very much. And thank you for watching. Those who want to catch the show again, you can do so online by going to our website. It's aljazeera.com. That's it for me and the whole team. Goodbye for now.